panel skirt. Okay, so it's still in this section of straight skirts, and we can see our flat drawing at the top there, and there's panels down the front and down the back. And you can see on the back there's darts, so there's panels and there's darts. And also we can see there is no center back line there, like a seam down it, so we can assume maybe the zip is on the side seam. So look at the flat drawing and take everything in, and then look at the diagrams underneath, because this is what we're going to do. Okay, so our diagram, our first construction, or our construction is going to look a little different to hers, okay, because she's separated out her blocks. So it will be a guide, but it's only going to look a little different. So she says, panel skirt at the top. This adaptation demonstrates how waist darts can be moved into panel lines. So she's just giving you that as a note before we start. When we're looking at the blocks, it's important to conceive of what we're looking at. So we've been trying to do that, trying to imagine this is half of the front, that's the center front line, this is our side seam, this is the back, all that stuff, the waist, and there are certain things we can't change. So when we're adapting for our style of skirt that we want, we can't change certain things. We can't change the size, essentially. So the sizing, the things that represent the size are that waistline and that hip line. We can change the length, but we're not trying to change the size. So these darts are constructed when you construct the block, and they're put into a nice position. If you were to sew up a skirt, you know, like this, they're placed in a position that's a kind of maybe the best position for your darts. But they don't have to remain in that position. They can move around a bit. We can't just ignore them. We can't just say we don't want a dart, so we erase it. Okay? But we can move it around. And we can also move these around a little bit here as well. The other thing is darts can be lengthened or shortened a little bit. So again, these are the optimal lengths of the darts for if you were going to sew like a tailored skirt, like the one we did in our sewing sample. It fits very well to the body. We can also put these two together. So we could put the two darts into one. It would be one large dart. So that's another thing you can do. You can combine them. So you can't just forget about that amount. You know, that there's 4 centimeters darts on the back, but you can make it, you could change it into one large 4 centimeter dart. Or you could do 3 or 4 tiny, skinny little darts. So you can change it within the boundary of having that 4 centimeter. And what she says is we're going to move, this adaptation demonstrates how the waist darts can be moved into a panel line. Again, we're going to apply our steps. It's the best way to do it. If we can go and look at first things first, being length. And she doesn't really say anything about the length. So let's just do a little practice and just lengthen this one. We shortened the last one, so let's just lengthen it a little, just to give us a practice of lengthening. It's going to extend down on the 3 lines that exist there on the block. And let's just say we want this to be maybe 8 centimeters further down full scale. So that will be 4 centimeters for you. So I'm going to go and mark in 8 along. And again, we can then wiggle through here, going that is no longer needed. We have adapted from that point, and that was our starting point. Then we're going to go up to the top. Again, this one, we're not going to adjust the top. We're going to leave it as is. So we've kind of ticked that then, and ticked that. We've done those 2. And the next thing is our features. And our feature on this skirt is our panel line. I'll read her instructions so you get to hear what her language is like. Draw panel lines on the front and back sections. So here's our front section and our back. Transfer the front and one back dart onto these lines. So it's telling you first you decide where your line goes, then you're going to put your dart onto that line. She says cut up the panel lines and along the dart shaping to separate the pieces. This is what we don't do. We don't cut. When she says cut, we trace and then we cut. And then she says trace around new pattern section. So very, very simple instructions, set of instructions there. The front and back, as we know, are not exactly the same. So, you know, if I come in whatever 10 or 12 centimeters here, I don't have to come in the exact same amount on the back, but typically they'd be similar. What you're doing there is we're trying to look at this and we're trying to estimate where is a good position for this panel line. About 10 centimeters in full scale. And you draw it in. So if I'm choosing 10, I'm putting 10 in, 10 in. So that's full scale 10. And so for you guys, that is 5 in half scale. And just to kind of make the point that they don't have to be exactly even, I'm going to come in 11 on this side. So essentially, now we're going to move our dart onto this position, because you can see from the image, we don't have, on the front, we have a line, but we don't have a dart right next to it, which is what it looks like there. So we're going to move our dart. When we move the dart, you just measure the amount of the dart, the width at the top, so it's 2 centimeters by 10, or whatever it is in half scale. Should be about 1 by about 5. And you're going to draw that dart into its new position. So you're going to take this and put it here. So 2 by 10. And then up like that. And then you see I wiggle through it. So I don't erase the dart. I wiggle through the dart saying this was my original dart position because I need to see that you traced your blocks okay. And then you knew that you had to move it onto this line, this panel line. And then we're going to take the back one, we're going to do the same. We're going to add our line, our dart onto it. So that's mainly our construction completed. What I'm going to do is just do some notches. Okay, so I'm writing that across again to indicate this is our construction. We don't ever cut this. We don't ever put this on fabric. We don't ever put seam allowance or hem allowance on it. It never goes near. It's our construction. I'm going to put in the notches. So again, she doesn't mention anything in words about notches at all, but if you look at her diagrams, these are the pattern pieces, you can see she does have lots of notches on there. So this notch up here you can see is from the hip line, which is handy, and then there's another one along there, which is somewhere along here, which we don't have anything in, so we choose and we place it where we think, you know, maybe roughly in the center. It doesn't matter too much. I mean, obviously we're not going to put it right next to it or down here, but just once you kind of have an estimate of a place, make sure that it's the same all the way across, because this panel will sew to that, so we need to have the notch, you know, in the same position. So if I come down 20, oopsie, I don't need one there.
Full scale.
20 full scale.
10.
So 10 half scale. So that's from the hip line. And one other thing we should do while we're on the construction, before we move to tracing off, is our straighter grains, because in this case we're going to break these into, there's going to be 2 separate pattern pieces for the front and 2 for the back, as you can see there. So there's going to be 4 pieces. And one of them is going to have our center front line in it, but the other has no center front line in it. And if there's no center front or center back, we have no indication of our straight of grain. So we need to be sure and have our straight of grain in this line, in this piece here and in this piece. We can use, the way she's done it there, she's got her, what she calls CB and CF to the full. So they are essentially, we're assuming those are the grain lines. But in this piece here, we wouldn't know where the grain would be, so she's got that little arrowed line. So I'm going to follow how she does it in the book, and I'm going to put a grain line in this section. So just from experience, it's handy to have a grain line a little bit more over to the side. So again, you do not need to have a particular measurement, you just need to draw a parallel line, so the measurement needs to be the same. So for example, I've come over 21, 21, 21 there to make my straight line, so that you are creating a parallel line, a line parallel to your center front. So on this one, I'm going to come in and my measurement is 14, 14 and 14. I measure over and I make. So with this one, there's lots of panels. I'm going to trace around the first one and then move my paper over. If you don't remember to move it over, you won't have room for your seam allowance. I have to concentrate on what I'm tracing off. So I'm coming down to the lower line because I lengthened it. So a lot of the time you need to apply, you know, some thinking skills about what you did to your pattern. And you can see along the front here, this one, there is no seam right down the center front, which means our little panel will be on the fold. I have written center front to the fold, and then just find somewhere to put my labeling with my name. The name of the skirt is the panel skirt. Now we get to the piece of the skirt, which pattern piece. And in the last couple ones we just had a front and a back. But in this case we have 2 front pieces. So you have to label this panel and this panel something different. I'll move it straight away so it's a little bit separate. When you have 2 panels like that, you could maybe call one the center panel and one the side panel. But you need to then identify whether it's a front or back, because the back will also have a center panel and a side panel. So you might call it the front center panel or center front panel, whichever, front side panel, side front. And then we are cutting one to the fold. I've left space because I'm going to add seam allowance and hem allowance in a minute. But now I'm going to go and do my second side of the front. Okay, that's what that big blob says, center front panel. And this is my side front panel. Or just call it your side front. And then we are going to cut 2 of these because we have one on this side and one on this side of the front. As per the flat drawing, one there and one there. So we need 2. So just see the way the dart has disappeared, but you can see the slight angle there. So when we sew these 2 pieces together, the dart is sewn into the seam. So the back's going to be the same, except that you'll trace in that little dart as well, and the side back. And then I'll go around and put on the seam allowance around it. And then we add hem allowance. The fact is, this is exactly 90 degrees here. So if that's the case, there is no fishtailing needed And again, in full scale, I'm coming down 4 for my hem. So I haven't put the seam allowance on this other one yet, but you can see the steps. You're to take this is your construction, and then you're to trace off this section here as one panel and this section here as another. Now I want to just show you something that you can do that helps some people. This is where the highlighters come in. To pick out which line to draw, to copy, you can use either symbols or highlighters. So there's 2 methods that can help you. If you don't need this, that's fine. But you can do something like this. You can put an X, an X, an X, an X. Okay? See the way all of a sudden I go, right, trace around the bit with all the X's on it, and then it stands out like, oh yeah, that section. And then say this section has O's on it. And then you go, oh right, I'm tracing off all the one with the O's. So that's one way that you can do it, because that would be with your own pencil. You can make little symbols. Another thing you can do is use the highlighter. Highlighter can be used like the symbols, and you can put little dots like that of the color around. It just means you don't have to put a symbol. It's kind of more color coding. So I can say, okay, trace off the pink section. See the bit 1 highlighted in pink? Trace off that section. Trace off the green section. And pay close attention to, say, which side of the dart that the green mark is on. So over here we have the one method of using the highlighter to pick out your panel, green versus pink. And over here we have the symbol method with X's versus O's, and then you could use other symbols, triangles and squares and heart or whatever else you want. Just a reminder that the seam allowance is 1.5 in full scale, and for you guys you're doing 0.5 in half scale.